This is called The Coast of Nowhere 2. It's for an old buddy of mine from Michigan, Mike Delp. It's brand new. I haven't read it ever.
All right.
Okay. The Coast of Nowhere. My best friend that winter was a cardinal, male by his call. At the time, I worked at a desk in the closet of a rented house, a piece of plywood laid atop stacked cinder blocks. Our unspoken competition, the bird and I, was to see which of us could get working before the other. If I sat down in the dark before he called from his oak perch, I would turn on the light and tap twice against the window. But if his song roused me from bed, I would stagger to my chair and signal with the lamp, "You win," in Morse code. We didn't bother keeping score, as sleep was rare for me, dread rampant, giving me a leg up on my bird brother. Only once in 3 months did he fail to show, a Tuesday in February with sleet and black rain pelting the eaves, the kind of pre-dawn dark that can reach through the window and grasp your gummed throat, hissing, "Your heart never was a bird, let alone a bright red singing one." I wondered if he'd met his fate the day before, the supreme banality of a house cat, perhaps, concealed behind a feeder filled with sun and safflower seeds. I went to work, worked late, drove the lakeshore home, and on the coast of nowhere, slept for once the sleep of the drowned. Woke to, "Dear, dear," the notes faint, as if heard from underwater, then sharper from high in the oak. "Dear, dear, dear, dear." My room flooding with light and orbiting motes. I blinked away the glare, looked out the window. Early sun on fresh snow, and a bird I knew was naming me.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Poets in Montana. And today we have Chris Dombrowski with us. Great friend, huh?
Old-time friend.
I thought maybe you were going to lose a friend in that poem. I was just going to get heartbroken, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, it could have ended otherwise, I guess. But, yeah, that was a pretty dismal winter for me. I probably could have lost myself. But, this old buddy of mine, Mike Delp, had retired from his job at Interlochen, Michigan. And he helped me through a pretty dismal winter. There, so he kind of is the cardinal, I guess, was the stand-in for him.
Nice,
right?
Nice, yeah. So you grew up in Michigan.
I did.
Yeah, and so you went to Interlochen.
I taught there.
You taught there?
Yeah, I always wanted
that's right.
to
You
go
went
there.
back there.
Yeah, I went back there to teach.
Yeah.
I probably always wanted to go there as a kid, but I discovered my love for writing a little too late in the game for that.
Right. Because that's high school, right?
Yeah, that's high school. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. So when did you first decide you were going to be discovering your love for the word?
I would say probably sometime around like sophomore or junior year of high school. I can't, I'm not sure the exact year, but I can remember the moment. I had an amazing high school English teacher who just fed me book after book after book, and many of the books that he fed me contained characters or stories or poems that took place in the natural world, and so I had been led to believe, that writing wasn't about those things, right? But suddenly it came alive for me, and the written word did, and that was the turning point. So I started writing poems about, I'd say probably junior year of high school.
Right, because of that.
Because of that teacher, yeah.
Well, and you always an outdoor kid? You always grew up that way?
Always, absolutely, yes. If I wasn't playing sports, I was, catching frogs or turtles or fish or exploring some
Right.
some little hidden some little hidden treasure of trees or moving water in an otherwise post-industrial landscape in central or center of Michigan. There, Lansing is where I grew up.
Yeah. So getting close.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
getting on my knees and looking for morels or antler sheds or whatever the case might be.
Right. So I noticed, of course, in retrospect, I noticed that all of your books have been done by Wayne State.
Yes,
Did you go
Detroit.
to Wayne State?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
They just happened to be really the first publisher that picked up my work.
Right.
Speaking of this guy Delp, who in my new book of prose, "The River You Touch," is the character Ralph. It's a book of creative nonfiction, but in many ways, like, he's a conflation of a couple of humans that I know. But Delp was instrumental in getting my book into the hands of Wayne State. The first book, as is the story for many people, came close to being published a bunch of times, and I kind of gave up on it, really. I had been a finalist for a couple of national prizes and published a lot of poems individually, but I just couldn't keep sending out the work. It's expensive,
Yeah.
And so
Back then, more so.
Back then, more so. Yeah, I tell my students nowadays, it was $15 for an entry fee, and $5 or $6 for the postage, and another $5 or $6 to copy your manuscript, right? And
then all the work of going and coming.
yes,
And
yeah. Your best friend is the people at the post office, right? They all know you, and they all kind of like, they give a big sigh when you come in with this stack of envelopes, thinking, I hope this is the time for this poor bloke, right? But anyway, Delp had passed along my manuscript to an editor there, and maybe 18 months later, I got an email from the editor saying, "Hey, we want to publish this," and they have put together 3 beautiful books for me. So that's the only connection. That, and my parents grew up in Detroit.
Yeah, right. Where did you go to school? Undergrad?
I went to school at a little college in Michigan called Hope College, and was incredibly fortunate there to have one of the best undergrad poetry professors ever in the history of American letters, a man named Jack Riddle. Jack was the son of an NCAA basketball coach. His dad, Buzz Riddle, had coached at University of Pittsburgh. The famous dunk by Jerome Lane that shatters the backboard, that was Jack's dad's team there. Send it in, Jerome, was the old Bill Rafferty call on that, and Jerome Lane, shatters the backboard. Anyway, so Jack was this perfect mix of poet who also could traffic the worlds that I knew. I played soccer as well, and he was always way more interested in talking about, like, how was the sandwich you had for lunch? I would come in with all these poetry questions, and he'd say, now, was that rye bread you had there? So beautifully disarming, and just an incredible professor. And we had an epic reading series. It's now named after Jack, but at the time, I think it was just extremely well funded. And we had, while I was there, I remember, Margaret Atwood, Chaim Potok, Joyce Carol Oates, Billy Collins. I could go on and on. I got to go pick Billy Collins up from the airport, back in the day, and had this old beat-up Toyota pickup, and I remember that was let's see, his first book was The Art of Drowning, and his second book was Picnic Lightning. And it was right before Picnic Lightning came out, so it was between like the first book and the second book. And I remember getting the call that I got to go pick him up. You know? And I said, like, well, what should I do? You know, how will I know who he is? Because back in the day, there wasn't even a picture on the back of the book. And, Jack just said, look for a guy who looks like a poet. He'll probably have a tan trench coat on. And sure enough, he did. You know.
Glasses, balding.
Yes, yeah. And he wrote a poem in my car on the way back to the college. So that's where I went to undergrad. It was a wonderful.
So you were fed well.
So well.
And then you applied to go to schools, and was this like a focal point even when you were sending out applications, or
yeah?
How'd you wind up here?
Well, after college, before grad school, I taught for a year in inner city Chicago, taught English. And then I came out in the summers and started guiding. I'd been coming to Montana in the summers since '95.
Okay.
And so when I did apply to Montana, it was certainly where I wanted to be. But there were, tons of other places I thought of going as well. I remember trying to decide between Arizona State and Missoula, and calling an old mentor, and he said, like, have you been to Phoenix? You know, like.
You like water?
Right. Yeah. So that's how I ended up here and entered the MFA program in '99.
Yeah.
So that was a few years after you.
Just almost right after. Okay, because I left. I was there in '98. I was gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just
okay,
like a year
God, I didn't
before.
realize we were that close to.
Oh yeah. So I remember when you showed up, and you showed up with Miles Wagner.
Miles was my
same group, right?
Yeah, absolute cherished classmate from that class of students, and yeah, I mean, what an amazing poet and translator too. Right. Yeah, he came out of the gates. We were all kind of like struggling to figure out what a poem was, and every week Miles would turn in a poem that would be published within a month or two, and it was kind of a liberating experience for me in a way, because, well, Miles was a little bit older and had a lot of, I think he had done an MA coming in, but when someone raises the bar that high, it can do one of two things. It can make you too intimidated to like produce anything, or it can make you say, it's going to take me a long time to get that good, so I'm in for the long haul, right? And I think for me it was the latter. And he was just such a great mentor and friend.
And teacher too,
right?
He
was an amazing teacher, yeah.
So not to jump off the chronological progression of where we're going, but you're teaching now at the university, right?
Teaching now at the university, yep. Nonfiction, actually. Here I am reading poetry, but...
which has to do with the memoir you just wrote?
Yeah, I have two memoirs. One's called Body of Water, about this Bahamian ecological kind of figure named David Pinder Sr., and then the new one is called The River You Touch, and both of those are out from Milkweed. The last one, The River You Touch, just came out fall of '22, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay. But I was going to say it was just within the last year.
Yeah, I have this wonderful kind of rhythm to my life right now where I'm teaching during the school year, and then I guide on the rivers for maybe 6 weeks, just long enough to completely wash the detritus out of the brain. And there are certain things I just don't remember, like when that book was published, even though it was 6 months ago. But
well, you got a lot of stuff going on. You started jamming all the stuff, the dates, and the pandemic, I think, has screwed everything up.
Yes,
time-wise, at least it has for me.
Oh yeah,
that and getting older, I guess.
It definitely put like a seismic. A seismic event in everyone's brain that people have recovered from differently. But Yes, so I teach nonfiction in the graduate program, and I direct the MFA program as of the fall.
Oh, wow.
Judy retired.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll miss
That's a big
Judy
change.
Blunt, but yes, we have, a couple wonderful poets: Brian Blanchfield, Sean Hill, Emily Ruskovich teaches fiction, and we'll have a visiting fiction writer coming in, and then an amazing nonfiction writer, Tony Jensen's coming in to do the distinguished James and Lois Welch visiting writer residency.
Is that a new?
That's a new position as of last year. The inaugural writer was Stephen Graham Jones.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. That sounds good. Time marches on, and you weathered the storm here for oaring in the water,
Yes.
and trying to make a living and survive, which is what poets in Montana do, I guess. But that's nice to know.
Yeah, man.
Because I knew Judy was getting ready to hang it up, and good. Congratulations.
Yes. She's tending her garden of beautiful flowers right now, and no doubt probably on her 20th batch of homemade jams for the summer, and we'll all be begging at her doorstep for some of them. And I'm excited for her. I think we all are hoping that she cranks out another memoir.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the part of the blessing and the curse of the role you're stepping into is
Absolutely.
It's a lot of goddamn work.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like it's going to take over your life in ways that you never imagined until you got there, right?
Yeah, I think so. And teaching has I'm sure you feel the same way. Like, teaching has a different effect on different writers, right? For me, when I teach a class, I rarely come away from it feeling like, oh, now I want to write.
Exactly.
It's a creative act, and your creative juices are somewhat sapped from that.
Yeah.
Like, I come home from 3 days on the river, and I feel like I want to write.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally.
So
That's exactly the same way I reacted to it too.
Yeah.
Whether I was teaching in high school or even just, teaching a bunch of, I tried to stack a bunch of kid stuff, like with the collaborative up in like way too many schools.
Yeah.
And you spread yourself too thin. But every time you go in, even if it's only 1 hour a week in that classroom, if you stack up a whole bunch of them, a lot of hours, the creative, energy that you put into that moment, it pulls away from the other time that you want to spend doing what you used to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, before we just bullshit our way through an hour, why don't you read another poem?
Okay, I'll read another poem. This is, I guess this is the second poem in my first book. The book is called By Cold Water, and the poem's called Get Up, John. Here comes dawn, and nothing rosy about her fingers. Stove flame blue, and some hand must have turned the burner on. The little tongues licking gradually the teapot of us aboil, cooking off a giardia of stars, the dregs of our nightmares. Who will place his fingers in the nail marks, come near enough to smell death in its hair? Already, we've some of us slid back into our bodies, re-stirring the air, our breaths stirred all night, whoever we are while we sleep, and gone about believing we are here. Ambulance sirens assure us of plum's sour skin. What's become of the poppies, dried, all but greenless, etc. But the yearling child, reaching into the lineaments of sun lancing between his crib bars, how might this shame us, that they seem graspable to him?
What's the title?
Get Up, John. It's an old bluegrass song.
Sounds
Yeah,
like a title.
I think it's a Bill Monroe composition, but it may be just an old traditional. There's a great old Emmylou Harris version of it.
Right, right. Speaking of that, I mean, speaking of Bill Monroe and what we kind of talked about earlier, in that because I mean, I've thought of you in retrospect, thinking back at your work, your poetry, as more of a, not more of a, but as a sort of nature poet, or a person that stuff comes from the natural world, and then you build these poems out of that experience. But as I was going back and reading the books, I found these voice poems that are in there. There's one for Bill Monroe. It starts with a Bill Monroe lyric.
Yeah. That's
I found that.
It's in Earth Again. That's a crazy one.
Yeah, I mean, I just on that level of voice, I'd like you to read that.
Sure.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Nostrums.
44.
Okay.
Yeah. I forgot about it. It's actually a prose poem. Yeah. I forgot about this poem. It begins with a line that I must have grabbed from a live Bill Monroe recording, which is, when a feller can play a banjo so well like that it begins to make the cold chills run over you, he can be doing you some good there, I'm telling you. And the gentleman here to my left can strum a November midnight with the lodestar lone as a thumbprint on a frosty window pane, and make a G chord yelp like a yard dog, porcupine quilled and left out to learn in deep snow. He might hold one note still as a bluebottle fly on a December sill, then tick his way through a scale like a right fevered man, or sound a bass chord hollow as a dilapidated cabin procured by the wind as its instrument, then fill you up with the next note, warm as whiskey, chased down with cold water straight from the spigot.
I should have warned you head on that I was going to have you read that. Then you could have practiced your Bill Monroe accent.
I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad. Yeah, I think that's the way I used to read that poem. But
yeah, because it's got that really
I haven't
built in.
Read that poem in a long time, or even thought about it. So, but yeah, I mean, the voice poem, as you describe it, I think is a way of kind of helping one's own voice evolve. Inhabiting that voice for a time is a way of reminding us of our manyness, or our sort of interconnectedness to everything and everyone.
Right, yeah, it's a part of tuning in. Whether you're tuning in to the trees and the water, or you're tuning in to that guy right over there telling you this goddamn story right now, and you just tune into it, and your head wants to reproduce it, I think, a lot of times, as a poet, maybe.
I think that's so right. I wrote a lot of fiction as an undergrad, and I actually had a hard time deciding what to go to grad school in. And as I look over my poems, so many of them are inhabited by characters, right? As you might say, or tried or are comfortable in the notion of voice poems. I mean, every time we put the poetic I on the page, it's a construct, right? It's its own it's its own character, but we certainly we know as poets, when that character is, quote, us, right? Or, the one that we call the poet, as opposed to, a voice or a character. But, yeah, that's cool. I'm glad you dug that one up.
Well, what else in terms of, I'm trying to think of anything I interrupted myself on. We were talking about your journey here, and then, I mean, one of the things I did notice, I guess, over the course of looking through your three collections of poetry again, was that, of course, somewhere in the second collection and then into the third, you are a father.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's a big change.
That's right where I was going to go from what you said, because a lot of the voices that begin to interject, if you will, with the poets are the voices of our children, right? And so that's, in Earth Again, I think, where they appear. Actually, that poem I just read was probably the last poem I wrote in the first book. The not the Bill Monroe, but the Get Up John one was, a newborn, but before the newborns were talking. And it's funny, our son Luca just graduated from high school.
That's amazing.
And we were looking through some old artifacts in the basement, and there was this painting. I'd have to go in the book notes to find out who it was by, but it's by an artist, and the title of the painting was called Things Boys Paint. And I found this painting about the time our own son was painting the things boys paint, like inhabited by dragons or alligators, or and this particular painting was there were a few soldiers on the ground, always figures like trying to protect something, right? Alligators, skyscrapers being blown up by unidentified objects or whatever. And so I wrote this poem, and that actually comes right after the Bill Monroe poem in this book. I'll read it as sort of a segue into maybe a couple other kids' poems.
Yeah, totally.
Good? All right. Things Boys Paint. A distant city barraged by twin-engine bombers, skyscraper flames incarnadine, half masking a flock of white swans above two glowering alligators. One soldier points his rifle at the beast, while a second stands between them, frowning. All harried by a single ill-defined flying object, which could be helicopter or archangel. So here's a poem called Stubborn Poem from this same collection. Man, it's nice. It's great to think about the poem being a net, if you will, that collects voices. Here's one for our daughter Molly, who was a belligerent sleeper, let's just say. And I made a deal with her. I said, I'll put you in a poem if you sleep, if you promise to go to sleep. I think she must have been like 4.
Deal with the devil.
Yeah. I wanted to write something as stubborn as the leaves that refused to fall. When October snapped so cold, but hung on like dour parchment, all crumpled through winter until February's first Chinook cast them off. One among the countless, landing on the creek's dense ice shelf on which I walked one warm afternoon with Molly, who pointed a small finger at the loner that, darkening as it sponged up the melt and warming as it soaked up the sun, had begun to sink into the crust. Slowly, though, like an anvil falling through a fathom of unbearably blue sea, sand flaring in silence as the iron strikes seafloor. The leaf looked a little like the black muscle as unmentionable in poetry as poetry itself, and while I pondered whether my own heart, lifted and laid clear, would melt as deeply into the frozen strata, Molly peeled it, the leaf, from the slush and held it briefly against her cheek before folding it in two. She dropped it into the hurtling riffle. How rare to touch a child's reddening fingers and know the leaf has let go its branch, that it is falling through the body at its vague pace toward booted feet. It will sound settling like a leaf lighting on water, or like the land gasping as it does each late winter evening when the sky at tree line nearly sapphiric goes black.
Nice. Does how old's Molly now?
Malls is 15. She's driving. She's driving. God, yeah. Yeah, there's another one in here. How are we doing for time?
Oh, I think we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
got
just
lots
keep
of
reading.
time. We got lots of time. Yeah,
on
whatever.
There's this book has a pretty elegiac bent to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seemed to me a pretty dark book. I didn't think I would, write a darker book in Ragged Anthem, the third book, but I did, which was a little disappointing, but it seemed true anyway. Like, I guess there's a certain sort of tone, a little bit of the sardonic in here. There's a poem in here called My Recently Implanted Government Eco Guilt Chip. Is one sort of poking fun at, my own eco-ness, if you will. But many of the poems are, as you pointed out, are sort of inhabited by our children. This one's called Naive Melody. The title's a nod to the old Talking Heads song. Some photos I cannot hold without kissing. This one spilled from the pages of a book like an aster whose petals, drying there, infused the words they were pressed between with a white so vivid the novel's droll protagonist walked out of his dark midday bar blinking at a lavish alpine meadow, though it had been December in Flint. A freckle like a photo is a text the lights helped write, which explains why my friend told the kind physician that he'd sooner lick a scalpel than let her scrape 6 melanomas from his facial canyons. 40-odd years ago, sunlight prisming on the Adriatic planted those crass moles in place, and I can still feel it, he said, bronzing my cheeks. He knew death was a wind searching the back of his hand, veins branching like his childhood sycamore, leafed out in liver spots, the trunk, its scaly bark, too steep for memory to climb. But he stared at it anyway, and was somewhere other than that antiseptic room, just as I, holding this glossy conjury, am no longer in the chair where dawn found me, tending my grief in the softening dark. I'm lying in June grass, looking up at her. She's 2. When I go to where he was in those late days, bring me flowers to kiss, hands to press between pages. Bring Molly laughing, Molly with the sun in her mouth.
There you go.
So yeah, there's a little bit of light in this book after all.
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of children, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also a part of the fear of death, right. or the awareness of death, I should say. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, you're talking about. I'm assuming that character is based on a biographical truth.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, I mean, like the first poem alludes to, children are on one level anyway, reminders of our mortality, right? But they're also, bells to mindfulness, I think, as one writer puts it, and they awaken us to the present, Yeah. I think it was Robert Hass, although I've looked over and over for this quote and can't seem to find it, but he says somewhere, it's not healthy to live in the elegiac mode. Mm-hmm. And I think, going back to my early days as a poet, I certainly leaned toward that, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And I think gradually the presence of our children in our lives have kind of pulled me like a little bit away from that, you know. It's dawned on me that I read a Luca poem as the first poem, and then I just read a couple Molly poems, so I should read one for our Lily, our third child. I know this poem's in here. This is my third book, Ragged Anthem.
Right.
Which came out when? 2019?
Before,
That's
right,
not
right
very-
before the
Okay,
pandemic.
yeah,
So it
all
got
right.
buried in the pandemic
Yeah.
like everything else.
That's right. All right, this poem, I know what it's about, but what the hell is the title? It's called, Saying Moon in Dusk. And it takes us back to that same coastline that I referred to when I read that original poem, The Coast of Nowhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Right.
it's upon the occasion, I guess, of our daughter, Lily, saying the word moon for the first time.
Okay.
And it's called, as I said, Saying Moon in Dusk. It takes place on a little point of land between these two dunes called Good Harbor, Michigan.
Okay.
Saying Moon in Dusk. The mating pair of salmon washed ashore at Shalda Creek's mouth. They do not praise, as I too often do, the austere, but they inarguably are. The buck's white teeth blanching in moonlight as its swart flanks darken on wet sand. The hen's eye socket picked clean by gulls that must have hoisted the vitreous skyward and left it hanging, hence the gibbous. Or so I tell my daughter, year-old and walking shoreline with me, saying for the first time in her short life the word moon, which silvers the water cape to cape as it swims the long miles from her mouth to the radiant place where it was born.
Nice. Yeah, you know, it's, I mean, that's the other thing that poems do is they hold those moments forever.
Yes.
In a way that, I mean, I just was out at a family gathering here not too long ago, and because I mean, neither one of my grown adult children have children. So, and I'm around a lot of kids, but not little 1-year-old to 2-year-old, that version, right?
Yeah.
And it is just so amazing to be around those things. And so I saw some nieces that had these little ones, and just listening to them, you know, talking and walking and doing their thing and watching them. You know, it's amazing. So to chronicle those moments, that's a good thing.
Yes. I remember coming across this line by Czesław Miłosz where he talks about his stance as a poet. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he's saying like, to retrieve those moments is in kind of opposition to what he calls time, which is like a skein of yarn thrown into the abyss, he says, you know. And so like the poem attempts anyway to sort of cordon off some of what escapes, right?
Right.
Which is, I mean, why the river is such a consistent draw for me. You know, I find myself there every year, and I love just, I love being physically
It's a
part of
metaphor
it.
for life.
But yeah, it is. It's like, you know, it's inescapably, well, it's emblematic of our experience, you know.
Yeah, right.
But it also, you know, I mean, we think of time as moving kind of horizontally, but it moves vertically as well. In the same way that a river in runoff will, you know, start off at, say, you know, like over the 6-foot mark on a gauge, and then by the time it's midsummer, it'll be down,
Right.
it'll be down here, and then that river, wherever you're standing in it, contains, in a sense, particulate that's been drawn along from somewhere else, right? It's held by rocks that have been there since, for millennia. So, let's just say it's a lot more complicated. Time is than our phone schedules would allow, right? Than
Our ability to comprehend it.
yes, yeah, our Google Meets or whatever the hell they're called.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, just the whole constantly changing aspect of water, of a river, is just the whole, it's a good version of what life is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you want me to grab one, or are you you're gonna read me another poem?
I'll read more.
Yeah. We should read a few more, a couple
Okay,
more,
sweet.
and then we'll see if there's any other words of wisdom we want to impart before we head out the door.
I'm kind of looking for. I was gonna say I'm looking for a river poem. Yeah, here's one. This is a poem called Tablet. There's a couple. Actually, I'll read a couple. How about that?
Yeah.
They're both called Tablet.
Okay.
The first one comes from Earth again, is about as close to a fish as I get in any of these poetry books. People ask me for a long time, what was your goal as a poet? And I would say, to not write about fishing, and then, and that was, I think, a really good exercise, because by the time I started work on Body of Water, which was my first memoir, a lot of the stuff I'd refused to write about was way richer.
Right. Available.
Yeah, and available, for sure. I hadn't minded.
Yeah.
So this one's called Tablet. Up the cut bank of a creek named after stone, striking stone, I came walking, my fingers stained with the pulp of raspberries picked from branches arced over descending snowmelt. Beneath two clouds and blue sky no one built. I napped between that extravagant quilt and sun-warmed sand until the taut line woke me, tugging in my palm. The trout's eye was a polished nickel poleaxed by a drop of ink, though I am writing this in the brown juice spit from a grasshopper's lips. Instinct having made for many a miracle, such as this emergent mayfly shaking its wings dry, to whom I whisper, go, light and soft, with this pittance, straight to the Lord whose commandments are writ in water.
Nice.
Here's a sister poem to that one. Okay. Brother poem, who knows?
Yeah.
Tablet. To obey, wake in the dark and put your head in your hands. Look out the window and rest your cheek on the shoulder of the mountain. Rise and walk to where the creek falls finally into the river. There, an apple tree stands hung with one last fruit. Pick it, or if it hangs too high, knock it down with a branch and eat it in 3 juice-spilling bites. From your knees, kiss the rill, surrounded by forget-me-nots. Beckon a brook trout to your hands, and if one arrives, study the vermiculate script worming along its sides. Over a stick fire, cook the fish until its skin pales and peels back from the orange flesh. Then feed yourself. Clean every last silver rib and feed the skin and dead-eyed head to the mass of moving ants, to the mass of ants on their moving hill. Then into this small boat of those remaining boats, fold yourself and row.
Nice. Well, I think that we've almost completed the circle. But one of the things, I just moved up into the hood,
Oh yeah, and the rattlesnake.
and so the other day we're walking because we can, which is a sweet spot, and and I bump into this gal walking her dog, and it's like she's got to tell me who she is again, and I'm like, God damn! I just, it's like 10. When you see somebody once about every 8 or 10 years, about your wife Mary, you've read for all your kids. You've got to have something in there for Mary. I just saved your bacon.
Yeah, man. You did. There's so many poems in all of these books for her.
Right.
Let me see if there's one in this new book. I feel like. In many ways, I guess my, there's one, there's another. In many ways, I guess, I've lived a sort of a, bipolar isn't the right word for it, but I remember, when I was a young writer, back to this first teacher who gave me A River Runs Through It as a book. I was in Michigan. And imagine reading that book if you're 16 years old in the middle of winter in Michigan, like to be transported and completely, kind of swept away by that prose.
Right.
I became a real student of McLean's work and wrote like a senior thesis on him as a high school student. And I remember one of the things that he says in this great audio interview with Kay Bonetti of the American Audio Prose Library. He says, she says, what was it like going out to Montana in the summers and then going back to the University of Chicago and teaching every year? And he says, it was a recipe for schizophrenia, but I was determined not to let it happen,
Right.
In many ways for me, like back and forth between the river and work was just that. Because I sort of bought into the idea that there was this separateness between them.
Right.
But the more I let one world feed the other, the more they became kind of conjoined, So
Right.
I was sitting here looking at these poems thinking, who wrote these, because I'm in the middle of summer and it's guide mode. But there's a poem here that I'll read for Mary. It's a dawn poem. You'll see her out in the neighborhood running in the morning, on mornings like this winter. This is called, a lot of the poems in this book, Ragged Anthem, take as their titles lines of music.
I noticed that.
Yeah, and so this is a Tom Waits line. The title of the poem is "It's So Hard to Dance That Way When It's Cold and There's No Music."
Yeah.
It's a blustery, big moon, kiss my ass if you thought spring was coming kind of morning, but she's running in it anyway, with grips called yak tracks strapped to her shoes, despite yak being largely herd walkers, not known for speed. Though I digress, while reclining fireside, with the pre-dawn malarkey that often passes for thought, as I scroll through her forgotten iPod, loaded with albums largely released when I was easier to love. With luck, the day will rotate toward one of those hoar-frosted afternoons when a southerly sun breaks the inversion and slight winds loose tiny flakes of frozen frost skin from the branches and marble-hard ashberries that the waxwings, long away, arrive to love, their forms braced by laden branches that settle briefly, if at all, before some unnamed fear stirs the birds and the tree explodes with the shrapnel of the miraculous. But for now, the impossibly slow snare drum count of her steps against the ice I didn't salt, careful steps, and she's back and letting inside a cold that has rendered my cheek somehow kissable. I scent the dark airs bristling as her cheek brushes mine, and she strides away humming something, little exumer, that note by spadeful note unearths me. I'm glad you saved me on that one.
Yeah, I know. Actually, it was a great example of what I think. If there's anything we do of value as poets, it's that we, like that poem does, it expresses just what a piece of shit we are.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so everybody gets to read that and go, oh yeah, I'm that piece of shit too. Right? It's that experience that that poetry is able to give people. I think that's an important experience.
I think so too. I mean, it goes back to Keats's notion of negative capability, right? The ability to remain in uncertainties without any irritable grasping after fact or reason. And one of those uncertainties is that, like, I'm imperfect, I'm causing harm.
This is life.
This is life, right? Yes. There's a, back to Milos, there's a, God, I can't remember who this reviewer is. I can picture her, Megan O'Rourke. Yeah, she's reviewing the collected Milos, and she says there's two kinds of honesties. There's the honesty of the innocent, right? And then there's the honesty of the writer who knows that they have played a role, however small, in all of the injustice, that takes place. And so she says, Milos falls into the latter. He never lets himself off the hook, basically.
Right.
Can I read one more? This is this is a new one. It's we talked about the elegy, and this is, I guess this is an elegy of sorts for my friend Billy Conway, who passed away. He was a drummer. One of his bands was fairly well known, named Morphine, and then he ended up he retired from that world and started caretaking a grass-fed cattle company ranch over near Wilsall in the Crazies. And my buddy Jeffrey Foucault, who's an amazing songwriter, born in Wisconsin, lives in Massachusetts, he had been a huge fan of Billy's work. Billy had drummed a little bit with Chris Smither and a few other kind of folk icons. And so Jeffrey basically went and dug him out of hiding and said, you tell me what it's going to take. I need us to be musical partners. And the two of those guys toured for the last 10 years of Billy's life. Just Jeffrey with a few guitars and Billy with a suitcase drum kit. And Bill became a dear friend and mentor of mine. And when he passed away, I hadn't written poems in about 2 years. And then they just, as you know, they just started appearing. And this is one that I wrote for him called Address. And again, his name was Bill. Address. Beautiful, clear night sunset, Bill. Long, lingering, and divinely framed by snowy outhills, backed by what I want to call a beyond of blue. Though beyond where? What? You would know. Gone just over a month now. Long enough, I worry I'm beginning to use your departure as an excuse for these spontaneous bouts of grief. In the produce aisle, say, shaking off a bunch of kale, or moments ago as sunlight streamed through the study window and struck the talisman dragonfly on the sill above my desk so keenly that the shadows of the retiform wings were unmistakable from the wings themselves. I saw them as made of luminous rooms, of vacancies strung together as in a spider's web, of the bright lattice work of breaths that comprise a life before the wings begin to vibrate and the body lifts.
All right. Nice, man. Thank you.
Sorry to read it off my phone, but
Oh,
that's where it resides right now.
Hey, that's where we're at. That's where we're headed, you know. We'll be paperless in another 50 years. Oh, is there anything else that you want to throw in or add to, or?
I mean, I would just say it's great to be here with you, and you know, I think it's such a fortunate thing to be part of this Missoula community of writers.
Yeah,
I
totally.
mean, I wish we saw each other more often. I wish we didn't have to work so hard.
Well, yeah.
That we were able to see each other more often. You know?
That's true. But you know, I mean, this is these little things give us a chance to. I mean, I've had you're almost 60. You're like not in age, but in the number in this series, we're at
cool,
about
yeah.
58,
Wow,
I think, of people.
wonderful.
Finally got you.
I know,
because
I
you
know.
know you've been working your ass
Yeah,
off and
yeah.
haven't been able to get a hold of you. But a lot of different people that you know, it's been a pleasure. Every single one of these has been a pleasure, just to hear, you know, somebody's work and to sit around and talk poetry.
Well, what do you think? I mean, you've been part of this community for, well, your whole life, really. But I mean, in terms of the literary community, since like '95 or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
How would you? What do you think about the state of things? Are you just as excited about it as you were back then?
Well, you know, I mean, and part of it is just the whole whole process of being around and aging, and you know, I mean, it's like you wonder what's going on behind you, because you really don't have that much of a clue. I've always tried to be as plugged into what's going on around me and behind me, and try to keep reading and stay up with everything. But it just keeps, there's more and more and more and more people coming in, and I'm sure that there is a huge group of young, vibrant writers in this community, as other communities that are making their own thing that they're going to carry forward. But the thing that I've experienced since I've been down, since, like, you know, the time that we showed up from the 90s on, or even I showed up here initially in the early 70s to go to college, and that was, you know, I mean, Hugo was still here and held that influence on the writing community, and met a few people on the fringes of that, and you know, it's just a. And you think H.G. Merriam before that. I mean, this idea of Missoula being a sort of a liberal arts hub, or a writing place for writers to live and be. It's been that way forever.
Yeah, it has.
And so my experience in it and during it has been wonderful. I have so goddamn many friends, you know, and then so many people that I don't even hardly get a chance to see very often, and they're all right here. But you bump into each other once in a while. You have a book come out, and you know, you say, "Hey, you read," and then you go back to your life.
Yeah.
It's a weird. You know, I mean, your comment about the whole schizophrenic bipolar thing. You know, I was listening to that and thinking, you know, that's just pretty much kind of probably a common thing for all people, maybe in the arts in places like this. Where you have to do something else to survive, but you still have this desire to make something, whatever it may be, and then share it with other people.
Sure.
That's what we try to do.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just I feel blessed. I feel really lucky to be in this place. And I'm happy that they gave me the little laurel wreath to wear for a couple of years, because I got to talk to everybody again.
What an amazing
and make a little
project.
pool of this too.
It's
you know,
it's an archive. That's
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a good thing.
Yeah, I got a text from my graduate class. We have a text chain or whatever, and they're getting together this afternoon at 1 in the afternoon in someone's backyard to just write and enjoy the sunshine. And I thought, all is well.
Yeah. It's still going. It's
Yeah.
still going. And like I say, James J is moving back.
Hey,
down.
that's right. Force of nature.
I'm excited about
I got
that.
a sweet letter from him about my new memoir. I need to write him back.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he told me that he sent you a letter that he dug your memoir, and I said, well, I haven't read it yet. But so anyway, I'll get to it.
Get the Cliff Notes from Jimbo.
Thank you for doing it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Great
good to see you. Good luck on the river.
Thanks.
And come back again next time, and we'll have another poet in Montana. A few more anyway before we're out the door.